"Ma'am, stop right there. This door isn't for you. No badge, no escort, no entry. Turn around and go back the way you came." Staff Sergeant Cory Marsh put himself between the woman and the vault. He did it the way the schoolhouse taught him. One step out, weight even, hands loose, body squared to the center line of the gray steel door behind him. He was 26 years old, and he had stood this post for 11 months. And in 11 months, no one without a badge had ever made it to the last 6 feet of this hallway. He intended to keep the number at 0. The woman stopped. She stopped exactly on the painted line, the one the day shift repainted every 90 days, the one most visitors never even noticed under their own feet. She did not step over it. She did not lean. She set the toes of her plain shoes a finger's width behind it and went still. The corridor was quiet, the way controlled spaces are quiet. A low electrical hum and the breath of the air handlers and nothing else. The vault door filled the end of the hall, a slab of cool steel with a cipher pad, a badge reader showing a single green standby light, and a posted access roster under scratched laminate. A camera watched from the high corner, its small black eye unblinking. Marsh looked at her and made the call he had made 100 times. Travel clothes, a dark blazer, a little creased from sitting, a blouse with no lanyard, no chain, no clip where a badge should ride, a slim leather case in one hand, the kind a person carried papers in, no rank, no name tape, no reason to be here. Lost, he decided. A contractor's wife who took a wrong hallway looking for the cafeteria. He let his shoulders ease a half-inch. "This is a controlled area," he said. "Visitor badges are issued at Building 1. You shouldn't be in this corridor at all." The woman did not argue. Her eyes moved, and that was the first thing, though Marsh did not see it for what it was. They did not go to his face. They went to the badge reader and held a half-second. They went to the camera in the corner and held. They went past his shoulder to the secondary fire door at the far end of the hall, the one propped open with a folded scrap of cardboard, and held there longest of all. Then they came back, level and unhurried, and rested somewhere near his collar. "Understood," she said. One word. Flat. No apology pressed into it, no nerves, no pleas. Marsh had heard every flavor of the lost civilian voice, the embarrassed one, the indignant one, the one that wanted to argue its way through. This was none of them. This was a voice that had simply received information and filed it. Footsteps came up the corridor behind her, unhurried, heavy in the heel. Senior Master Sergeant Otis Pryor, the flight chief, 44 years old, and 26 of those in uniform, came around the corner with a coffee in one hand and read the hallway in the time it took to lower the cup. A young defender squared off at the vault. A woman in civilian clothes stopped on the line. He had broken up enough standoffs to know the shape of one, but the shape of this one was wrong, and he could not say why yet. It was the stillness. People stopped at that door all the time, and they fidgeted. They shifted their weight, checked their phones, looked for somebody to appeal to. This woman did none of it. She stood with her hands visible, and her weight balanced, and her breathing slow, and the only thing moving was her eyes, and her eyes were working. "Hold your post, Marsh," Pryor said. "Eyes on her, not on me." "Roger, Chief." Marsh straightened. Having the flight chief at his back made him feel, briefly, taller. He turned that into a little more certainty than the moment had earned. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back from the line. You could get somebody written up just standing in this hallway. You don't want that, and neither does whoever you came to see." The woman stepped back. Exactly one step, square, no shuffle. She lifted her left wrist a few degrees and looked at her watch. The watch face was turned to the inside of her wrist, dial against the pulse, the way a person wears it who has spent years not wanting a glint of glass to give a position away. She read it in under a second and let the wrist drop. There was something else in how she carried herself, and it took Pryor a moment to name it. No jewelry, no rings, no chain, no earrings, nothing that caught the corridor's fluorescent light and threw it back. Her hands were bare and her wrists were bare, except for that one inward-turned watch, and the slim case she held had no luggage tag, no monogram, no airline sticker, none of the small civilian barnacles a real traveler's bag collects. She was sterile, in the precise sense of the word, that the people Pryor was thinking of used it, carrying nothing that could identify her, nothing that could glint, nothing a person on the far side of a long lens could fix on. Civilians did not arrive that way by accident. They arrived that way on purpose, and the purpose was a habit, and the habit took years. Pryor saw the watch turn. He did not know what it meant. He knew it meant something. He took a slow sip of coffee he no longer tasted and did not take his eyes off her. Marsh folded his arms in front of the steel and decided he had handled it. The woman simply waited, patient as poured concrete. And in the high corner of the hallway, the camera blinked once, a small mechanical reset, the only thing in that corridor that had truly looked at her and recorded what it saw. The vault stayed shut. The standby light stayed green, and the morning, which Marsh believed he had under control, had not even started. For a while, nobody moved. The woman seemed content to let the silence run, and silence, Pryor was learning, was a thing she was comfortable inside. Most people filled it. She used it. Then she spoke, to no one in particular, in the same level voice she'd given the single word before. "Your boundary's been open 4 minutes," she said. "That door at the end should alarm when it's held. It isn't alarming. Somebody's defeated it." Marsh followed her glance to the propped fire door and felt a small needle of irritation. "Maintenance props that," he said. "It's fine. It's always like that." "It's always like that," she repeated. Not a question. She let it sit in the air, and in the air it changed shape, and Marsh heard, a half-second too late, what he had just said out loud. A controlled area boundary that was always defeated, a door that should alarm and never did. He had described the deficiency himself and handed it to her. Pryor's head came around. The woman went on, unbothered, the way a person reads a page. "Your posted roster shows open storage hours started at 0730. One name's initialed in for the period. 1. She had not moved closer to read it. She had read it from the line, upside down and at distance, in the seconds before Marsh ever spoke. "This is a 2-person integrity space during open storage. You've got 1 signature holding a 2-person door." She was not finished, and she delivered the rest of it in the same even voice, a person reading aloud from a page only she could see. "The cipher pad," she said, wore its heaviest polish on 4 keys, the same 4, worn smooth, which meant the combination had not been changed on the cycle the regulation required, because a code that rotated left its wear spread across the panel instead of burned into a single short pattern. The camera in the high corner swept a fixed arc, and beneath it, in the near corner by the reader itself, sat a wedge of floor the lens never reached, a blind spot 2 strides wide directly in front of the most sensitive point in the hallway. She had counted the keys. She had measured the arc. She had done all of it from behind the painted line, in the minutes before the major was ever called, while 3 defenders thought she was a woman who had taken a wrong turn. "How?" Pryor said slowly, setting the coffee down on the entry control desk. "Would a visitor know we're in open storage hours?" The woman did not answer that. She let the question answer itself. Marsh's certainty wobbled. He covered it with procedure. "Ma'am, I'm going to need a name." She gave him one. Ashby. Nothing after it. No first name, no company, no reason, no soft civilian sentence wrapped around it to make it easy. Just the surname, set down flat like a stone on a table. That, more than anything, was what turned Pryor all the way around. A lost contractor gave you everything. Her name, her husband's name, the office she wanted, the wrong turn she took, all of it spilling out to prove she belonged. People who gave you one word and stopped were not lost. People who gave you one word and stopped had been taught to. And she still had not reached for the slim leather case. A guilty person would have been waving paper by now, badges, letters, anything. An innocent, confused person would have been digging through a purse. The woman called Ashby held the case at her side and did not open it, as if its contents were not an argument she needed to win, only a fact she would produce when the procedure called for it. Pryor stepped back to the wall phone. He kept his eyes on her the whole way, and for the first time that morning, the unease in his chest had a clear edge to it. He was no longer looking at a problem he needed to remove from the hallway. He was looking at a problem he needed to identify, and the difference between those two things was the difference between a quiet Tuesday and a day that would be talked about for years. Behind him, Marsh shifted his weight in front of the vault and told himself the chief was being careful. That was all. The woman read her inward-turned watch again. 4 minutes had become 9. The fire door at the end of the hall stood open the whole time, and not once did it make a sound. Word got out the way word always gets out on a flight line, faster than any radio. By the time Pryor hung up the wall phone, 2 more defenders had drifted into the corridor with the particular slouch of people who had heard there was a show. One of them, a young airman with a fresh haircut, had his phone half out of his pocket, and a grin he was not bothering to hide. "That her?" the airman asked. "The tourist?" "Phone's away," Pryor said without turning. The phone went away. The grin did not. Quite. The woman gave them nothing. That was the thing the airman could not get over later, when he told it in the chow hall. She did not glare, did not plead, did not perform offense for the camera he had almost raised. She stood on her step-back line with her hands visible, and let 3 defenders and a flight chief look at her, and she looked back at none of them, and somehow that left the audience feeling watched instead of her. Marsh, with a crowd now, reached for the phone himself. He wanted this settled and off his post. He called the squadron front office and got passed along, desk to desk, until a voice he recognized came on. The squadron's special security officer's line, relayed through an assistant who clearly had the major in the room. The answer came back fast and certain. "I don't have anything on my calendar," the relayed voice said. "Nobody's read into my vault today. No inspection, no visitor, nothing. Walk her out of my controlled corridor before she sees something she's not supposed to." Marsh lowered the phone. "Front office says there's no one authorized today, Chief. No inspection on the books." He said it toward the woman, as much as to Pryor, a small flourish, the institution itself agreeing with him. On paper, the front office had just said, "This person does not exist." The woman's expression did not change, but something behind her eyes did a quiet piece of arithmetic. She marked the time. She marked the 2 chess tapes she could read from where she stood, and the rank on the airman with the phone. She marked the camera angle and the dead arc beneath it where the lens did not reach. She marked the propped door, still open, and the single initial on the roster. She was not building a grievance. A grievance is a feeling. She was building a record, line by line, the way she had built records for 20 years, and a record does not raise its voice. Pryor did not like how fast the front office had answered. He did not like how sure it was. An office that had truly never heard of a person took a beat to check before it said so. This office had not taken the beat. It had answered like a man slamming a drawer. "Break it up," Pryor told the gathered defenders. "This isn't a show. Back to your posts." They went, slow, reluctant, the airman last. The corridor emptied back down to 3, the sentry, the chief, and the woman on the line. Here is the part worth sitting with. the part this channel keeps coming back to. There was nothing loud about what was happening. No one had been struck. No one had been screamed at. A competent person had simply been told, by people too certain to check, that she was no one, and she had let them be certain and waited. If you have ever stood in a hallway holding a truth that the confident people in the room had already voted down, you know exactly how long 4 minutes can be. Stay with her. The people who are sure of themselves this early in a story are rarely the ones still standing at the end of it. And if a story about earned competence finally being seen is the kind you came here for, you already know where the subscribe button is. The corridor was quiet again, 3 people and a shut steel door. But the front office was already in motion. Somewhere down the building, a man was pushing back from his desk, fast, and starting for the vault. And of everyone in that hallway, he was the one with the most to lose if anyone ever scanned the badge in the slim leather case. Major Spencer Drake came down the corridor at a pace that was meant to be read as authority, and read, instead, as fear by anyone who knew the difference. Pryor knew the difference. He watched the major come and felt the edge in his chest sharpen. Drake was 41, trim, his uniform sharp, his voice already going before he reached them. He talked the way certain men talk when they have decided that volume is the same thing as standing. He talked in paragraphs. All right, what are we doing here? Chief, why is there a civilian in my controlled corridor? Why is she still here? Why am I hearing about this from 3 desks instead of from my post? You. He turned the full weight of it on the woman. You walked into my controlled area with no badge and no escort, and you expect me to take your word that you belong. That's not how clearances work, lady. That's not how any of this works. That is a reportable event, and I am going to report it. Then report it, the woman said. 2 words. She did not raise her chin to say them. She did not sharpen them. She handed them over plainly, and they landed harder for it, because a person who says, "Report me," is a person who is not afraid of the report. It did not slow Drake down. Men like Drake read calm as guilt. It is the only way their certainty survives contact with a person it cannot rattle. He turned to Marsh. Start a suspicious person entry. Log her as an attempted unauthorized access to a special access facility. I want base police walking her off the installation in 10 minutes, and I want it all on paper. Marsh hesitated for the first time that morning. Sir, do you want me to scan her credential first? She's got a... I don't care what she's got. Anybody can carry a case. Log it and walk her out. And there it was, the thing the woman had been waiting for without seeming to wait for anything. She did not point it out. She simply watched him skip it. The major was standing in front of a 2-person integrity vault, building a security incident, and at no point had he done the one thing the situation actually called for. He had not run the badge. He had not called the program office that would own a real inspector. He had not verified a single fact. He had decided, and now he was papering the decision. She lifted her wrist and read the inward-turned watch. The economy of it, the exact degrees of the lift, the under-a-second read, the clean drop, went through Pryor like a cold draft. He had served with a handful of people who moved like that. None of them had been lost. None of them had been no one. Drake mistook the watch for nerves. Am I keeping you from something? He said, with a small, ugly smile. You're keeping yourself from something, the woman said. I have time. Pryor stepped in, low, trying to hand the major an exit he was too proud to take. Sir, respectfully. 2 minutes. We scan the credential. We settle who she is. And if she's nobody, we walk her out with the paperwork airtight. If we log her first and she turns out to be somebody, the paperwork's a problem. She's not somebody, Drake said. Look at her. He had decided what she was the moment he saw the travel clothes, and the decision was now load-bearing. Too much of his morning rested on it for him to lift it and check underneath. He wanted her gone before anyone scanned anything. He took the incident form off the desk, clicked a pen, and signed the first line of it. A false statement, in his own hand, that the woman in front of him had attempted unauthorized entry into his vault. He did not verify a single thing before he signed. The woman watched the pen move. She did not stop it. She let him write it, the way you let a man dig in soft ground. And the only change in her face was a small settling around the eyes, as if a thing she had suspected had quietly been confirmed. Pryor saw the signature go down and felt the morning tip over some invisible edge. He had given the major the clean way out twice now. The major had signed instead. Whatever happened next, the chief thought, that signature was going to outlive this hallway. Pryor stopped waiting for permission. While Drake stood over the woman reciting the regulations she had broken, the chief slid behind the entry control desk and pulled the badge audit history up on the terminal. He told himself he was building the airtight paperwork the major wanted. He was not. He was checking the major's vault against the major himself, and he did not fully admit that until the numbers were in front of him. The numbers were wrong. 90 days of badge audits scrolled up the screen, each one initialed, each one signed off as performed. The same initials, day after day, in what the scan of the paper logs showed as the same blue ink. And underneath those signed, performed, initialed audits, the reader's own activity history sat flat. On a third of those days, the badge reader showed no audit activity at all. No card swipes for the audit, no system queries, no log pulls. The audits had been signed on days the machine had not been touched. You did not have to be an inspector to read it. But Pryor had stood enough posts to feel his stomach drop, because the pattern was not the loose sloppiness of a busy shop. Sloppiness is random. This was even. This was maintained. Somebody had been signing the audits without doing them, steadily, for 3 months, smoothing the record into a clean fiction. And the single name that initialed those 90 days, the name that owned the roster and curated the calendar, was the major's. That was when the last piece turned over in Pryor's head. A real inspector would not appear on the squadron calendar, not if the man keeping the calendar had 3 months of falsified audits to hide, and the authority to keep his own spaces off anyone's schedule. The reason the front office had answered so fast and so sure that no one was authorized. Today was that the front office was the thing with something to hide. Pryor came out from behind the desk. He did not go to Drake. He went quietly to the woman and angled himself so his back was to the major and dropped his voice under the major's monologue. "Ma'am," he said, "if you're who I'm starting to think you are, I'm about to make a call I can't take back. So I'll ask once, straight. Who are you?" The woman looked at him. For the first time all morning, she gave a person more than a single word, and it was still almost nothing, and somehow it was enough. "Make the call, Sergeant," she said. "Then stand by your post. Both of you did one thing right today. Don't undo it now by getting clever." She paused, and the next part she gave him like a small gift he would understand later. "You pulled the logs without being told to. Hold on to whoever taught you that." She lifted the inward-turned watch and read it again, and Pryor finally understood what the gesture was. She was not nervous. She was timing. She had been timing all morning. How long it took, in a system this confident, for one person to stop defending the certainty and start checking it. He had just made the clock stop. Pryor went to the wall phone. He did not call the squadron front office, which owned the lie. He dialed past it. Up. The wing command suite. The number a flight chief is not supposed to need, and is very glad, twice a career, that he memorized. And while it rang, here is the question the whole morning had been bending toward, the one worth holding in your mind through the next minute. Who was she? Why did a woman with no badge stand in a defeated hallway and let a major sign his own name to a lie rather than say a single word to stop him? And why was the most frightened man in that corridor the one holding the keys to the vault? The answer is 2 floors up, where a 1-star general is about to write a name on a pad and stand. If you want to be in the room when a quiet person turns out to be the loudest fact in the building, stay. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, because the next 60 seconds are why this channel exists. 2 floors up, the phone rang on a wide desk, and a hand reached for it. While the building waited, the woman sat. The entry control anteroom was small and cool and beige, a hard chair and a clipboard rack and a window of bright June light. She sat with the slim leather case flat across her knees and her hands folded on top of it. And for the first time that morning, the story lets you inside, because there are things only she knew, and they are the reason for everything you have watched. Her name was Helena Ashby. She was a colonel in the United States Air Force, 47 years old, and the case on her knees held a credential built to make readers like the one in that hallway obey it. She was a special access security inspector, and she had come to this installation the only way her inspections are worth anything, with no notice, no calendar entry, no escort waiting, nothing for a curated record to prepare for. The whole value of her morning was that no one had been able to get ready for her. That a major could keep her off his calendar was not a failure of her arrival. It was the finding. She was not angry at the young sergeant. She wanted that clear, even if only to herself. The sergeant had done the thing the entire system was supposed to do and had stopped doing. He had held an unverified person at a boundary and refused to be talked through it. She had spent 20 years learning to tell the difference between a man guarding a door and a man hiding behind one, and the sergeant was guarding. The major was hiding. The audits in that terminal were the wall the major had built out of his own signature, and it was a wall that protected nothing but him. She knew about walls. That was the other thing in the anteroom with her, the thing she carried into every controlled corridor in the country, and the light in the window pulled it up the way certain light does. Autumn, 2011, 11,000 feet. A mountain valley folded between 2 ridge lines, the air thin enough to make every step a negotiation. She had been a captain then, 32 years old, a combat rescue officer leading a guardian angel element toward a downed aircrew pinned against a rock shelf with the light going. 4 survivors, 26 minutes of usable daylight, a clock she could not stop and could not argue with. She remembered it in the clipped grammar the work had taught her, because that was the only grammar that fit. Move, cover, count. The cold coming up out of the stone through her knees, the way sound behaved at altitude, flattened and far. Her para-rescue man, Technical Sergeant Aaron Pike, working the wounded with his hands, while the ridge above them came alive, calm in the exact place where calm is hardest, doing the most human work there is in the least human place there is. The approach had been the worst of it, before the worst of it. They had come in low and split, 2 elements working up the dead ground toward the shelf, and the ridge had not opened up until they were committed, the way ridges do, waiting for the moment a thing cannot be called back. She remembered the precise weight of the decision to keep going. Not courage. Nothing so clean as courage. Just the arithmetic of 26 minutes of light and 4 men who would not survive the night where they were. She had keyed the net and said the only thing there was to say, and the element had kept moving, up into it, because that was the work. They got 3 of the 4 moving toward the bird. The 4th could not move on his own. Pike put himself between that crewman and the worst of the ridge, and he stayed there, and he did the work, and the ridge took him for it. He was 29 years old. He did not move off the line, and because he did not, the crewman lived. Ashby carried the last survivor the final 40 meters to the helicopter herself. And somewhere in those 40 meters, the mountain put a fistful of shrapnel across her back, and she did not feel it until they were lifting. 4 crew came off that ridge alive. Pike did not. The Silver Star and the Purple Heart came later, in a quiet room, and she wore the ribbons rarely and thought about the man constantly. "We don't leave them," she had said over the net that day, and she said it again now, in the cool beige room, silently, to no one, not the crew, not Pike, not the line. That was the whole of it, the through line from a freezing ridge to a beige anteroom on a hot June morning. A wall is only as real as the one person willing to stand on it and be hated for standing there. Pike had been that person. The sergeant in the hallway, blocking a colonel with no friends and no badge, had been that person too, without knowing it, without thanks, with a major telling him he was wrong. She was not going to break him for getting it right. You do not break the wall. You find the man who replaced the wall with his signature, and you pull the signature out, and you let the wall stand. The anteroom door opened. Pryor stood in it, and behind his shoulder, the corridor light had changed. More people in it now, a different weight to the air. The waiting was over. Colonel Helena Ashby, who had carried a crew off a mountain and left part of her own backup there, stood up from the hard chair with the slim case in her hand and walked back toward the vault to finish the inspection she had come to do. Out in the corridor, Drake had not improved his position. He had made it worse, because that is what cornered certainty does. He had heard that Pryor went over his head to the wing, and the knowledge had not made him cautious. It had made him frantic, in the controlled way of a man who believes he can still win if he just gets the scene back under his own paperwork. If he could finish processing the woman as an intruder before anyone important arrived, then the record would say, intruder. And a record is a hard thing to argue with after the fact. He had built his whole career on that principle. He reached for it now. "All right, we're done debating this," Drake said. "Sergeant Marsh, detain her. Secure that case as evidence of an attempted unauthorized access. Cuff her, log her, and I'll sign the statement myself, full statement. Attempted entry into a special access facility. I'll have it written before the wing duty officer finishes his coffee." He said it fast, stacking the orders, trying to make them a current that would carry the young defender along before the defender could think. But the young defender had been thinking for the last 20 minutes, and the thinking had changed him. "Sir," Marsh said. He did not move toward the woman. "I think we scan her first." "That's not what I told you to do." "No, sir." Marsh's voice was steady, and steadiness in a 26-year-old facing down a major is a rare and quiet kind of courage. But she called the propped door at 4 minutes, to the second, and she read the roster from the line, and the chief pulled the audits and got real quiet. "Sir, I'd rather scan her and be wrong than cuff her and be wrong." The woman, Ashby, though Marsh did not yet know to think of her by the rank that came with it, watched the major and did not lift a finger to help herself. She had spent the morning letting the system reveal itself, and it was revealing itself now, in the gap between a major who wanted her in handcuffs and a sergeant who wanted the truth, and she would not put her thumb on that scale. The sergeant had to choose it himself. He was choosing it. She watched Drake sign. Because he did sign in the end, he pulled the full statement form across the desk and wrote his name to it. The formal attestation that she had attempted unauthorized access, the document he believed would lock the record in his favor. He signed it the way a man pulls a door shut behind himself, not knowing he is on the wrong side of it. For the first time all morning, Helena Ashby smiled at him. It was not a warm smile. It did not reach for him or invite him in. It was the smile of a person watching someone finish building, with great care and his own 2 hands, The exact thing that would undo him. It was final. The way the last line of a ledger is final. "Go ahead and sign it, Major," she said. "Then scan the badge." She set the slim leather case on the entry control desk. She opened it herself, not handing it over, not surrendering it, simply producing it, now that the procedure had finally, through the courage of a sergeant rather than the authority of a major, called for it. Inside, clipped in place, was a badge. Pryor saw it first and went still. It was not a visitor laminate. It was not a contractor card. It was unlike anything Marsh had ever fed into that reader in 11 months of standing the post. Marsh lifted it toward the scanner. Drake, too far into his own statement to call it back now, watched the green standby light and said nothing. And for 1/2 second, the corridor was perfectly, completely silent. The air handlers, the hum, the held breath of 4 people, and a small black badge moving toward a small green light. The reader took the badge. It did not chirp the ordinary single tone, the friendly little beep that means access granted. Come in. The screen woke and turned and held, and what it held was not a green word. It was a stack. Clearance designators climbed the small display, level over level, each one above the line that the vault behind Marsh was itself cleared to hold. Beneath them, a flag came up in hard red, "Do not impede," and beneath that, a standing instruction in the same red, "Escort and notify command immediately." For a moment, the reader simply held the stack on its small screen, and the 4 of them stood inside the held breath of it, and the only sound in the corridor was the soft electronic note the system made when it was waiting for a human being to acknowledge an instruction it had no authority to give itself. The machine had been built somewhere by people who had anticipated exactly this, a badge like hers reaching a reader like this one, and had decided in advance that when it happened, the reader would not decide anything. It would stop and flag and wait and put the weight back on the person holding the card. Marsh read it once. He read it again because the first time his mind refused it. The badge in his hand did not belong to a visitor. It did not belong to a contractor. It belonged to someone whose authority sat above the vault she had been blocked from, above the squadron, above the major signing a statement against her, someone the system itself was built to obey on sight. The blood went out of his face. He felt it go, a cold, sliding drop from his scalp down, and the certainty of 11 months at the post went with it. He was certain, in that instant, of one thing only, that he had spent the entire morning blocking, condescending to, and very nearly handcuffing a colonel, and that whatever came next, it was the end of him. "Ma'am," he said. The word came out cracked. "Ma'am, I didn't know. I didn't know who you—" He could not finish it. The sentence died in his throat. Beside him, Major Drake's face went through its own changes, and they were slower and worse. First confusion. The screen was wrong. The reader had glitched. There had to be an error. Then disbelief. Nothing carried authority above his vault. That was not possible. This was his space. Then recognition, arriving all at once and unwanted. A no-notice inspection, a national credential, a woman who had let him talk and let him skip every verification and let him sign. And last, horror, settling over the recognition like cold water, because the horror was not about her. It was about the form under his own hand, and the 90 days of audits behind it, all of it now sitting in front of the one person in the country built to read exactly that. He stopped talking. For the first time that morning, Major Spencer Drake had nothing to say. Down the corridor, a door opened. Brigadier General Warren Castellano came through it, at the unhurried pace of a man who is never the one who has to rush. 52 years old, the wing commander, Pryor's call still fresh in his ear. He took in the hallway in a glance, the white-faced sergeant, the frozen major, the woman at the desk with the open case, and he did not call a formation. He did not order anyone to attention. There was no salute, no line of bracing troops, none of the theater the morning might have led you to expect. There was only a one-star general crossing a hallway to address, by her rank, the senior officer in the building. "Colonel Ashby," Castellanos said, "the wing is yours. I'm told you've already found the first finding." "I found two, sir," Ashby said. "One of them's wearing the right uniform." Drake stood frozen over his own signature. The sergeant who had blocked her braced himself, eyes down, waiting for the colonel to turn and end his career with a sentence. And Helena Ashby turned, deliberately, and gave her first attention not to the general, not to the major, but to the white-faced young defender who had refused to let her through. What came next was fast, but it wasn't loud and it wasn't cruel. That matters, because the easy version of this story ends with a man in handcuffs and a corridor full of people enjoying it. And that is not what competence looks like when it finally has the room. They moved to the special security officer's office, Castellano and Ashby and Pryor, with Drake brought along to stand and answer. The audit history went up on the office monitor, 90 days of it, the signed and performed line riding over the reader's silent days underneath. Pryor walked the general through it in plain language, the way he had read it himself. The general's face hardened by degrees. Ashby did not raise her voice. She never had all morning, and she did not start now that she finally could. "You didn't fail a check, Major," she said. "People fail checks. A failed check is a finding I write up, and a unit fixes. You replace the check with your signature. 90 days. You signed audits on days the reader never woke up, and you curated a calendar so that the day someone might actually look would never come. That's not a deficiency. That's the finding." She let it sit. And it's why the only honest record of this vault's security this morning was a sergeant standing in front of it refusing to move. It was Pryor who put the last piece in front of the general, because Pryor had found it, and Pryor had earned the saying of it. The reason no inspection ever appeared on the squadron calendar, he explained, was not an oversight. The major owned the calendar. He owned the roster, he owned the audits, he owned the schedule that decided when anyone from outside would be allowed to look, and a man who owns all the locks can keep the one room he is afraid of off every map there is. The falsified audits were not the whole crime. They were the symptom. The crime was that a single officer had been allowed to grade his own homework, sign his own checks, and curate the very calendar that was supposed to bring an outside set of eyes. And for 90 days, no outside eyes had come, because the man hiding the failure was the man holding the pen that scheduled the looking. "That's the part you fix first, sir," Ashby said to the general. "Not the major. The major's a finding I can close today. The system that let one man be his own inspector, that's the one that grows another major the day this one's gone." Drake was relieved of his security duties where he stood, decertified, pending action. It was administrative, and it was decisive, and there were no handcuffs, and no shouting, and no marched-out spectacle, because the offense was a man who had quietly hollowed out a system from the inside, and the answer to that is to remove him from the system, freeze the vault, and rebaseline every access from zero. Castellano gave the orders quietly. The vault behind them, the one Drake had been protecting, went into lockdown to be rebuilt access by access, the way you rebuild a thing whose foundation you have just learned to distrust. Then Ashby turned to Marsh. The young sergeant braced. He had been bracing since the screen flashed. He expected the worst, and the worst, in his imagination, had gotten very detailed. "Look at me, Sergeant," she said, and he did. "You blocked a colonel. You had no badge to check against, no friend in this hallway, a major telling you that you were wrong, and a flight chief who didn't know yet either. And you held the line, and then you went one better. You said scan her first instead of cuff her first. Do you understand that in this entire building, this morning, you are the one person who did the job exactly the way it is supposed to be done?" "Ma'am, Marsh started. "I talked down to you. I called you a tourist. You were firm with an unverified person at the boundary of a special access vault," Ashby said. "That's not the thing you apologize for. That is the job. I'd rather have a sergeant who's a little too sure at that door than a major who's a little too smooth behind it. One of those defends the vault. The other one is the threat." She said it for the room, for Pryor, for the general, and for the record that would be written. Put it in writing, all of it. The staff sergeant held the only correct position in the facility today. Here is the thing worth carrying out of this story. The reason it is worth your 48 minutes. The loud people were wrong, and the quiet people were right. And that is not how these mornings usually go. And watching it go that way once is its own small repair. If you have ever held a line you were sure of while the confident people told you to step aside, this one was always for you. So leave a word below about a time you held it, because those get read. And if you want more stories where the right person is finally, quietly seen, you know what the subscribe button is for. Late afternoon. The light through the corridor's high window had gone gold and long. The propped fire door at the end of the hall was closed now and alarmed, and a work order sat against the wall to fix it properly. The badge reader showed its single green standby light. The vault was sealed, waiting for its new access roster, clean from zero. Colonel Helena Ashby came back down the corridor one last time, slim case in hand, on her way out. Staff Sergeant Cory Marsh was at the post. He came a little straighter when he saw her, and there was something new in how he stood, something that hadn't been there at 0730. Not fear, and not the brittle certainty of the morning, but the settled weight of a man who had been tested at his post and had, it turned out, passed. Ashby stopped in front of him. She did not have a medal for him, and she did not have a speech. She had one line, the kind you hand to a young man who is going to stand at doors like this one for the next 20 years, the kind that has to be small enough to carry. "The wall only holds because somebody refuses to move off it," she said. "They'll spend years trying to teach that out of you, make you smoother, make you easier, make you the kind of guard who waves the major through. Don't let them. The day you get comfortable enough to stop blocking colonels with no badges is the day this door stops meaning anything." Marsh held her eyes a moment longer than rank strictly allowed because he wanted to be sure he had it, all of it, before she was gone, and it became a thing he only remembered. The smoothest guard in the building had nearly cost it the only honest record it had this morning. The least smooth one had saved it by refusing to be smooth. He thought he would be turning that over for a long time. "Yes, ma'am," Marsh said, and then, because he had to, "Thank you, ma'am." She did not answer that. She only nodded once, the same economy of motion she had shown all morning, and walked the length of the corridor and out through the door at the end into the blue June afternoon, where the light was warm and the air moved, and no one knew that the woman crossing the lot had carried a crew off a mountain and left part of herself up there to do it. Behind her, a sergeant stood a little straighter at a gray steel door. The line had held. It had held all day, against the whole weight of a confident building, held by the one man they had all wanted to blame. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.